You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Spirit Dimension with your host, Kerry Greenaway, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening and welcome to The Spirit Dimension. My name is Kerry Greenaway. And tonight on The Spirit Dimension, we're going to be talking all about tech. And you all know I love a little bit of tech. So I've brought in a couple of guys with me that help me talk about tech because you know me. So first up, I have got a co-host, the lovely Ashley Nibb. Good evening, Ashley. How are you?
Hi, Kerry. I'm good, thanks.
Good. And the man of the moment whose work we're actually going to be focused on is actually the lovely Graham Smith. Good evening, Graham.
Good evening, Kerry. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, lads. Very well indeed. So, Graham.
Yes.
You are developing some tech, aren't you?
Well, yes. I've actually developed a piece of kind of research equipment that is designed to detect changes in gravitational force in a localized environment, which is basically to kind of verify a prediction made in a theory called supergeometry.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to explain the supergeometry theory a little more for people?
Yeah. I mean, it can be quite a complicated theory to explain. The guy who developed the theory, his name is Thomas P. Fusco. I've spoken to him on numerous occasions, and I've listened to radio shows where he discusses it, where he's been on shows for 3 hours and has only just touched a small portion of his theory in them 3 hours. That's how vast it is. But the basic concept of his theory is that obviously how we understand our reality at the moment is a two-stage reality where we have relativity and quantum mechanics. And basically what he's done is that with regards to his theory, there is a third state, which he calls the non-physical, which is basically where the information and the intelligence of our four-dimensional universe exists, and this information goes through a process to materialize in our four-dimensional universe in order to become physical. So he had basically the main link between the non-physical realm and the into our four-dimensional reality. The driving force for this is actually gravity. The reason why he's focused his attention a lot on gravity is because gravity still isn't really understood in mainstream physics. There's a lot of hypothesized theories relates to gravity, because we observe 90% more gravitational effect in the universe than there is physical mass to explain it. So in order to kind of counteract the anomalies within the gravitational that we observe in the distant universe, is we have to physicists have had to hypothesize an invisible form of matter, which they call dark matter. But also, physicists understand that the universe is also expanding and accelerating. So they have also had to hypothesize another form of thing called dark energy. So obviously there isn't actually any physical evidence to support this. And one of the stumbling blocks for physics time and time again is gravity. They can't seem to fit it in with any of their kind of models. So what he...
Oh, on that cliffhanger, Ashley.
Have we lost him?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I'm sure he'll come back. But
trying to find a way of incorporating gravity. Hello?
You come back. It's okay, you're back.
But we got you back.
How much did that miss out? A lot?
No. It's only the last probably 30 seconds. I think we lost Ford, didn't we?
Yeah.
Still trying to fit the gravity part in. So the stumbling block was gravity, and then from there sort of really, I think we kind of lost you.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all.
Did I mention? Did you manage to hear the bit about dark matter, dark energy?
Yeah, we heard that bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, gravity has always been a bit of the stumbling block for physics. So one of his aims was basically, to kind of sum it up, his theory isn't solely to do with or related solely around paranormal phenomena. Paranormal phenomena was the kind of light bulb moment for him when things started to fit into place, when he was kind of coming up with this kind of theory of everything. So gravity was the main thing that he wanted to incorporate into his theory of everything, and he kind of looked into other people's research, which all of these concepts aren't necessarily his idea, but he's managed to fit them and piece them together in order to work. And how he said is that he had to kind of overanalyze it time and time again to make sure that kind of any counter argument or kind of conflict within his work he could then he could answer, or it could be, or he could find a way of explaining it simply to people. Because how he kind of explains it to me is that in order to really fully express your ideas and concepts, you need to be able to explain it in a simplified manner.
I agree.
And so he, without having to kind of go into too much more detail with it, because, like I said, we could be here all day talking about that. Yeah. And I suppose that if in future sort of shows for yourself, he might be someone to bring on. But like I said, one of the predictions made is obviously when information is going into this process of materializing in our four-dimensional reality, a bubble in space-time has to manifest in order for this information to materialize in, because obviously everything of mass warps the space around it, including ourselves. Every atom, everything that that exists in our universe shapes the fabric of space in some shape or form. Obviously, like for example, going back to gravitational lensing in the distant universe. Obviously, this creates these kind of like optical illusional effects, because the light from a distant universe has to come past the kind of galaxy cluster that's in front of it. So the gravity changes the direction of light, so it warps and shapes the light because of the fabric of space, and these the change in space time.
Right.
You gone?
So this led you, because it's very complicated, to be fair.
Yes.
But I want to go to you in this. I don't really want to talk about Fusco. That's sort of your starting point, wasn't it?
Yes, it was,
with this theory. So let's go more on. So that's you read that book,
mm-hmm.
and I know you've spoken to Mr. Fusco.
Yes.
Quite extensively. But that led you down a thought pattern, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as anyone knows me, over the years, my mind has gone more scientific rather than from a spiritual point of view, and what I'm experiencing as ghosts and spirits. Obviously that was the belief that I had when I first got into the paranormal field sort of 8 years ago. But over time, from observing paranormal phenomena and kind of investigating, I've changed my perception. So yes, I got into this frame of mind and wanted to become more scientific, which was something I was never ever interested in before, but now I am.
Okay.
So basically, I got into this theory because it was one of the theories that I came up with that came to my mind. Where I felt, wow, this guy's really got a handle, on this, and something that we can actually work with. I'm going to have to be unprofessional here, and my little girl has just woken up.
Okay, so dip out for a moment, and I'll continue with Ashley, because Ashley's quite aware of your research as well. So that's fine. So Ashley, you read this book too, didn't you?
Yeah, I've read this book, and I've just chucked the name of all of it in the chat room for you as well.
Oh, thank you.
No worries.
So good.
What a professional, eh? Yeah, no, I read the book as well. I took away from it similar things to Graham, to be fair. There was also a few things that didn't, what's the right term here, didn't resonate with me, but there was a lot of information in there that did resonate with me, to be fair, because it does touch on a lot of scientific stuff around relativity and things like that, and understanding how information can be transitioned from one place to another. I think it works in some particular ways, and I think Graham thinks in other certain ways about how it might work, and obviously Fusco another way, and we all kind of think that. But the most important thing out of this is the next step is to take that theory and then work something out of it, create something to pick up these changes, these anomalies, and then you can start thinking, well, if that actually happens, then we can then say, where do we go next? How do we prove this? What does that mean? And all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, go on. He's going to jump in then.
Sorry, I was because. The next step then is to record these bubbles. Is where we're going to call them bubbles, yeah, or distortions.
Yeah, basically, if I get it right, and if Graham's listening or if Thomas is listening, maybe they'll correct me. But from what I understand, it is basically as these anomalies occur, which could be, and these anomalies could be things that we usually associate with paranormal activity, or as these gravitational field bubbles occur, which are obviously completely invisible, you can't see them, but as they occur and sort of appear, which and they could be any size, from like quite large to like tiny little golf ball size or whatever, as they occur, they obviously change the gravitational field that they surround, which is what Graham's trying to measure. But when they do that, they also have an effect on the surrounding space and time within that area as well, which is why you may get things like the temperature may change. You may hear things as well, and all this kind of stuff. So it basically, when these things happen, we're under the assumption that they're the part of the causality for some of what we think is paranormal activity. So what we usually associate with the possible presence of ghosts and spirits and stuff like that, this could actually be either be a natural phenomena that we haven't looked into, or it could be something that's occurring due to spirits and ghosts, or due to something that we're doing as individuals using our mind, so to speak. So not on purpose, obviously, as well. So the first step is measuring those gravitational field bubbles and finding out if they do actually exist, and then how they occur and the information around them, and if we can start understanding how to be in the right place at the right time to measure them and all that kind of stuff. Because obviously part of science is reoccurrence, and but at this kind of stage it's kind of like it's kind of finding a needle in a haystack is probably the best way to say it, but that's why you could easily find a needle in a haystack if you had a magnet, couldn't you? So
so it's finding the right piece of tech to measure. So it's like having your magnet to find the needle is
right.
Getting the right tech to pick up the data that's required that will prove these gravitational bubbles occur.
Yeah, and what I love about the theory is it talks about how information comes from this other. well, I don't want to call it dimension, but that's the only word I can think of at the moment. Another dimension. So basically, information comes into this, can permeate into this dimension, and then become matter. And for me, that's quite interesting because it then begins to fall into a telepathic kind of interaction kind of area that I'm quite interested in, which is why I'm quite excited about the same kind of area. So kind of there's a story I get into it and where I understand it. Graham obviously comes at it from the measuring the anomalies and understanding that they exist, and then moving forward from that. So that's why he's been devising this piece of tech, which I've seen, to try and measure these gravitational anomalies.
Okay. I don't think Graham's back with us yet.
I am back.
Oh, yes. You are back. Right. Excellent. So, Graham, you're developing this piece of tech.
Yes.
So we know it. Right. You're trying to measure the gravitational bubbles. That's how we'll name them. Yeah. So, in your tech, how do you measure gravity? And I know this sounds stupid. This is a stupid question probably, but how does that happen? How does that occur?
Well, basically, it's quite simple, really. And just expanding with the experiment anyway. I'm kind of working slightly blind with it because I'm not sure on what kind of in variation of what strength or the gravitational force that I'm looking for. So basically, it's a shot in the dark, really. We're setting up this experiment, and I'm hoping I detect some anomalies within the gravitational field at the Earth's surface, right? Which should kind of verify the prediction made in Thomas's theory. So I haven't actually got a precise measurement that I'm looking for at the moment. So basically, it's just going to be a trial and error to see whether or not the sensors that I have put in place to kind of detect these changes are sensitive enough. But what the concept behind it is quite simple, actually. We have in our phones, we have a couple of sensors, which one of them is an accelerometer and one of them is a gyroscope. And how our phone works is when we change the orientation of our mobile phones, how it knows how far we turned it in order for the screen to change with it, vice versa, is the force of gravity is applied to this sensor. So depending on what variance of of how much gravity is present on that kind of axis, because the sensors are on three axes, X, Y, Z, height, width, and depth. So depending on the force applied to which part of the sensor tells you what the orientation of the phone. So with that in mind, I thought, wow, if obviously the phone is able to kind of detect these kind of changes in gravity, then it might be worth kind of applying into an experiment. So I had this idea last year in my head, and I thought it was going to be quite an extravagant one because I was going to have to kind of learn a lot about kind of developing my own technology and programming and stuff like that. So it for a long time I didn't think I was going to be able to achieve this goal, but I managed to be able to put something together which actually has turned out quite well, and pretty much similar to the concept I had in my head in order to formulate a fairly decent experiment with. So I managed to get these sensors. I decided to go for cost reasons, first of all, to go for a 3-sensor setup. So what I would do is I would set them up in a particular hotspot location in a haunted property where I'm more likely to get activity than any other part of that property, and focus the sensor's attention on that particular area. So what it would be set up in a triangular formation. So I would try and at least get them kind of positioned in places where I'm more likely to be able to detect these anomalies. What I would have preferred would to have gone with either a 4-sensor setup or a 6-sensor setup to kind of cover more areas of the room. But for now, the 3-sensor setup I think will be sufficient enough, at least just for testing purposes anyway. So obviously I managed to get the sensors into place. I managed to find a way of not actually being present in the room at the time. This experiment is running to avoid any kind of human contamination, and to be able to observe it from another location within the property. So now I actually have like a sort of kind of viewing station that I'm able to watch all three sensors, whether that be kind of just watching the numbers come up on the screen and change, or watching it in graph form. And also what it does as well, it records the data that it's detecting at the time. So once I've finished the experiment, I can save the data, run it off, and then kind of analyze it at a later date to see if we've detected any anomalies. Because how I've, from my testing at the moment, just to kind of gauge, it's kind of a baseline reading, and sadly I've only been able to kind of test it at my house, and I've run probably about 5 tests now, for various different times. I first of all did an hour, then 2 hours, then 3 hours. I've discussed this many times with Ashley, and Ashley has always said to me, "Are you recording these and documenting them?" And I'm like, "No." So it's good to have Ashley on board to kind of keep me focused and trying to get me to kind of look at it from that point of view, which he kindly, last week when I showed him the experiment, gave me one of these laboratory notebooks. So I've got to start completing that now when I start the experiments. So thank you very much, Ash, for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for giving me more work, I think is what he just said there.
That's absolutely, yeah. My time is already restricted, Ashley. God damn you.
So the data you're recording,
yes,
on this piece of tech that you've developed, is, go over that again. What are you recording with that?
So basically, what my equipment does, it measures the force of gravity applied at the Earth's surface on a particular on 3 axes of the sensor. Yeah, because basically gravity, the force of gravity we experience is all linear. It's all coming down towards the Earth's surface. Yeah, that's why we kept on,
Remember
grounded.
to keep this simple.
Yes, I will.
So gravity goes down, doesn't it, towards the centre?
Absolutely. So when I'm observing the graphs and the sensors and the data that's coming through, on one axis, because there's 3 axes, right? Height, width, depth. Yeah. So on one axis, I should have a constant reading, which does kind of fluctuate now and again, but very, very minor, normal stuff. Will be recorded as 1G. Okay. Some of the sensors come in a different measurement called meters per second, but my one records it at G force. Can I just ask one question now? Yes.
Gravitational force, is it a constant? So there's no fluctuations, like with the Earth's electrical fields that we have, they fluctuate all the time, don't they?
Yeah.
Even underneath the Earth's surface, they're fluctuating all the time, but gravity doesn't.
No.
Okay.
This is kind of what I've observed doing my kind of tests. Is that the measurements I'm getting, all 3 sensors are remaining at 1G on one axis, and then the others are remaining at 0G. Okay. Now the theory should state that when these gravitational field bubbles, or as in the book Thomas Fusco has written, they're called differential bubbles. It's all to do with a particular theory that he's researched, but as an easier form of understanding, we just refer to them as gravitational field bubbles. Mm-hmm. Should one of these occur, it should create its own independent gravitational field, which means then it's not linear. It's all it can kind of be informing all on all axes. Yeah, so you should be able to detect a gravitational anomaly on all 3 axes, height, width, and depth one. So X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously when you kind of test sensors to check that they're working, what you do is you kind of just give them you just make them move slightly and just kind of jolt them around. You can detect the changes applied to the sensors. Yeah.
Right.
So you can check that they're working and stuff like that. So the whole plan of it is to see whether or not, during any kind of manifestation of paranormal phenomena. So if it's, for example, say we're in a location and there's, an apparition that's seen in a particular room and it, frequents there regularly. So obviously I would probably be expecting to observe more of a gravitational kind of manifestation on the data, because it would be, obviously there's more. Hello?
Yep, no, you're still with us.
So I've lost my train of thought now. Something popped up on my screen, so it just
you take your experiment to a haunted location where you know that there's a regular haunting, as it were, caused possibly by this gravitational bubble. So it's the gravitational bubble that you're recording that could possibly, maybe, give us a step forward to explaining why we experience that phenomena.
Yeah, or how it works, the mechanics behind it, how it interacts with our four-dimensional reality. So basically, what it is that we can't observe what's not physical, but we can observe, the process of something becoming materialized. Yeah. So gravity is the process that we would be able, the first step to knowing whether or not, in relation to this theory, that this something is about to manifest itself. So basically, it's like at the emergence point of the phenomena. So in order for this information to materialize, this gravitational field bubble needs to kind of manifest within our four-dimensional reality. So basically, when this occurs, this gravitational bubble occurs, so it's an empty space. And then what happens is, because it basically warps the space around it, it then affects the kind of local environment. So you then start to experience the certain anomalies that we detect on our devices. So one being the electromagnetic, devices, will be able to detect these changes, because what it does is it crushes the kind of pushes and pulls around the atoms around it, exciting the electrons within the atom to a higher orbit, and then obviously it starts emitting a kind of electromagnetic field, and also as well, you'll then also experience changes in air pressure, and with that you obviously will experience changes in temperature as well, and there is also potentially the potential of detecting gamma radiation at a haunted site as well. I'm not too familiar on that. That's something I'm not read up too much on, but I know that gamma radiation at some dangerous levels have been detected during the kind of emergence point of phenomena manifesting.
Right.
So there are other aspects too, but the gravitational field bubble is the first thing that should appear at the emergence point of information materializing in our four-dimensional reality, as the theory states.
Okay, so right, these gravitational bubbles,
Yep.
by definition of his theory, should be able to happen anytime, any place, anywhere. They're not going to just be in a haunted or an old castle or a field or something like that. They could occur anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you wouldn't necessarily.
But only. But what he's saying is that we're all everything of mass is part of this process. But we're what he calls fully materialized. Yeah. Whereas basically paranormal phenomena isn't necessarily fully materialized. It's just materializing and then dematerializing. So it's never actually fully materializing. Yeah. So it was not saying that these anomalies are that frequent, but what he's saying is that during these kind of manifestations, this is what should occur.
Okay.
I know it's a grand concept to get your head around.
Sorry.
And be like, it does throw other questions at. But from my perspective, I've come across many different theories that I've seen over the in the past before I came across this one.
Okay.
And this is the only one that kind of really, really has given me any type of framework to work with. And I felt to myself, well, this guy deserves a bit, deserves, someone to kind of look into this for him.
No, every theory needs to be taken a step further, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to go,
absolutely,
okay, so you've got a point. Let's see if we can step it further. You might not be able to prove it beyond doubt, but it's trying to take a theory and make it workable. Not make it workable, but and that's what science does, doesn't it? It starts off with a theory. I mean, even Newton, with gravity, going right back at the beginning of it, he had a theory, and then he had to do things to prove that theory.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. It is a difficult concept to get around, and obviously this is something I've thought about time and time again. Even I've had kind of my own kind of feelings and doubts about it, and I would go to Thomas and present him with a particular question, and he'll explain it to me. But that's because he's so familiar with the research connected to it. I mean, he has the education, in that area, whereas I don't. So I do rely on him a lot. I'm not kind of trained in anything scientific. I am working as a kind of amateur in this field, and I'm fully aware that I can come across a lot of criticism for it, but I'm not bothered about that. I'm just bothered about the work I'm doing, and if I can do something that actually gives, presents some slight answers or potential for answers for his work, that maybe I could then present to a kind of physicist. Say, I've got this, what do you think? And then it's something that may be of interest to them, then that might kickstart something quite major with it.
But that's the point. But that's the point, Graham, isn't it? And I'm going to bring Ashley in at this point, but that's the whole point, isn't it? When you look at theories and ideas and how they've progressed through, and different people do different things, you can explain this probably better than I can, Ashley, so go ahead.
It's completely. You drop that with me then. I know a great latched onto this kind of the idea. And to be fair, I read the book, I think, from your suggestion. To be fair, and I got dog's being bad. I read the book straight after you kind of suggested it to me. There's a couple, like I said earlier, there's a couple of parts that I didn't resonate particularly well, but there is a bit of it. I do like this theory. I do like the differential bubbles, and the fact of information sort of coming into matter, or semi coming into matter, into our environment, and the bits that he describes in the book is how that could be what's perceived as being paranormal activity in certain areas and this kind of stuff. I mean, as we just mentioned as well, this doesn't mean it's always located to haunted locations and all that kind of stuff. It could happen absolutely anyway. It's just haunted locations become more under scrutiny due to the fact that we pick up on their history and stuff like that, and that's why they become haunted locations. So it could be done anyway. I mean, there's a question in the chat room about the experiment. Is it done in a shut-off room? It's probably best done in a shut-off room, to be honest with you. As you mentioned earlier, no human contamination. So I'm all for it. I think it's brilliant to do stuff like this. You've got to take a theory at some point, and the thing about a theory as well is before you work it all the way through is you're working with the hypothesis and understanding, like you said, you're learning as you're going, sort of thing, and understanding those bits and pieces. So it continuously evolves until you get to the point where you fully understand certain things, that you begin to measure things. I mean, you've now spent, would you say, is it about a year putting this bit of kit together and learning how it works and learning how the information around it works in order to put it together. And now you get into the phase where you're like, right, I'm going to do some experimenting. But even at that point, you're still testing the water to find out what you're looking for, aren't you? Absolutely.
I mean, this is the thing, and this isn't about going into a haunted location for an evening and trying to come away with the answers. We're talking about potentially a year or 2 years worth of work, doing it regularly. I mean, I've been discussing this with a few other people. In order for this experiment, and I feel for me to have the best opportunity of detecting these anomalies, I need to find the right location. So I've had a few offers, other locations nearby to where I live. However, I just didn't feel that they were the right places where I was going to be able to have everything that I needed. So, what I really needed was a location which, I could instill good controls and avoid human contamination at all costs. I wanted a location that was pretty much regularly active with paranormal phenomena. And also, as well, to be fairly local to where I live. I know that's a big ask, for all these things, but also as well to be regularly accessible and obviously free of cost, really, in order to do this, because it's going to be very time consuming. It's not about going around and kind of interacting with spirits or ghosts. It's about going into a location, having a focal point, and having experiments set up which is stationary, which is designed to monitor a particular specific area of a property and just focus attention in that area and monitor the environment and the data that is coming through. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I seem to prefer that more than actually going out ghost hunting with, audio recorders and ghost boxes and things like that. I'm much happier kind of observing the data and coming through and analysing it at a later date. And hopefully, if I can get the right location, which I have been talking to someone who has a location, who knows people that has a location that I think is perfect for me, and I'm just waiting to see and hear back whether or not they're happy for me to do it. I'm not going to name it because I have promised that I would obviously keep it a kind of under lock and key with regards to where it is. And it's more about the research purposes rather than the actual location and the type of phenomena that's occurring. I'm focusing my work purely on the information that I'm looking to detect during my experiment. So I'm hoping I'm going to hear something back this week, so then I can really start making headway. Because this location that I've got my sight set on at the moment is absolutely perfect. It meets all the criteria for me. And it's also actually a location that's been very close to my heart for a very, very, very long time too. So if I can get the go-ahead to do it there, oh my God, I'm going to be the happiest man in the world, I tell you.
So you start doing these experimentations and you start recording the data. And myself and Ashley have discussed this quite in depth as well, that we feel more answers are going to come out of the patterns in the data than in the traditional methods of of investigating at this moment in time. So it's building that picture up and that database of data, and looking at the patterns that are occurring or the anomalies that are occurring within those patterns, and seeing if they work in regards to theories that we know, or whether or not it changes the theory. I mean, I've been looking into a theory, and at one point I was looking at one specific area, and with a very short space of time, the data added up that it wasn't effective. It just wasn't relevant because it just wasn't backing it up at all. So you then have to reassess and change and think, okay, so it's not that, so what else could it be? And that's how you work in regards to looking at it from a more scientific perspective, isn't it, Ashley?
It absolutely is. That is. I mean, and what you said there's some of the things that have happened to me in the past. I've looked at certain bits and pieces, thinking that as you evolve through this sort of the field, and you thought things you've taken as gospel, so to speak, is probably the best way to put it. And then all of a sudden you look into them in depth, and then you find that it unravels, and you think, oh, I've been led down a garden path a little bit. But then when you start looking at data and you find those patterns, you find something that's growing and sends you in the right direction, it gets a bit more exciting. I mean, one of the things I've actually, in relation to this particular subject, is I think I mentioned it to you, Graham, is I was, as you know, I frequent the SPR on a regular basis, and I actually stumbled across an old proceedings of the SPR that had a paper in it by a guy called Bernard Carr, who's actually on the council of the SPR, and a physicist. And he's written a paper. I mean, I've only skimmed through bits and pieces of it, but there's parts of it that seem quite similar to Fusco's idea. which is
right. Okay.
which is quite good to know, because it means that that's beginning to tie in. If other ideas are similar to that idea, then that means there's more credence to them, which makes it more interesting for me, because it's a factor of data, isn't it? If there's more of the same, then obviously there's a bit of a pattern going on there. So I've got to try and pull that for you, because I think that might help with what you're looking into. So
absolutely, I mean, that would be good if I can have kind of look at it. Definitely. Would it be possible to even share it if it kind of relates to share it with Thomas? I mean, I suppose he would be interested in kind of looking at it as well.
I think when we all start in this field, we all start as we all come at it really from there's that evolution through your journey in regards to paranormal investigating or knowledge base. I mean, I know, speaking from myself, I came from watching TV shows, wanted to have a go, went out in the field, and that led on and has led on and led on. And now I'm in a completely different place to where I started from right back at the beginning. And I know that both you guys have done this too, haven't you? You started sort of going out just doing investigating how, everybody seems to do.
Yeah.
And then it progresses through, and all of a sudden it's not enough. You want to know. We all start with the why, don't we? Why does that happen? And then we start looking at energy, frequency and vibration, and start reading up by people like Thomas Fusco, Tesla, people like that. And then it raises more questions. But then you find the area that you suit. Like for me, it's the environmental, geological. Ashley loves his data in spreadsheets and that kind of thing. You're very good at the tech side of things.
Well, I mean, just kind of expanding on, what we've been saying about, I think it's important for people to understand, the journey we've been through, because I think sometimes when I kind of talk about, my work with people, especially people that from a ghost hunting point of view, see me as a skeptic or a non-believer, and how I kind of, want to kind of project or present myself, to them is that actually, I actually entered the field as a believer in ghosts and spirits, and that was, and not, I've actually observed some very, very, strange paranormal phenomena, over the course of my journey, some things that I can't explain through normal means. But what I will say is that no matter what I've come across, and some of them have been very scary occurrences, it's not been enough to tell me that I've been dealing with something of a kind of of mass intelligence. That one, have I been able to have an effective means of communication and fluent communication with? No. What are my EVPs? Well, they're all one word answers. Have they ever been anything more than that? No. Can I arguably say that all my kind of K2 communications have been 100% kind of in time with, when I've asked a question and they've replied? No, not when I carefully analyse it and become more critical, and kind of really analyse, that process. No. So when I've actually nailed it down, over the time that I've done paranormal investigating, I can only say that there are probably two occurrences that I actually have could not even kind of have any doubt over that's paranormal phenomena. Whereas the other ones, there are always slight bits of doubt. So, in 8 years, there's two examples where after carefully be, kind of critically kind of analysing, that particular observation or experience, can I say, oh yeah, I there's no other thing or reason that could be other than some form of paranormal phenomena. And that's the mindset you have. And I think that doesn't happen enough, because people, and like myself as well, I wanted these things to happen. So, I really, and there were some times where things were happening, and in my head, I made them out to be bigger than they were. They're more extravagant. But then when I really carefully, at a later date, really thought about them, re-listened to, audio recordings or kind of reassessed, things that I'd observed, I kind of thought, actually, there's many possibilities for these things. I think I was just always so keen to experience and witness paranormal phenomena that at times I would kind of, even in my head, over exaggerate the things that I've experienced because I wanted these things to happen so badly. So it's only over a course of so many years of doing this that I've had to change. My perceptions changed because, you know, what I was watching on TV, what I was watching or listening to on like radio shows or reading in books, and you know, when I was going on ghost hunts and stuff like that, you know, it changes the picture for you, and you think, hang on a minute, you know, this field isn't really what it seems to me, you know, or what it is presented to be as. So that's when I started looking at things from a more of a scientific objective, and it was from that point when actually I started to realise that actually there's more scientific research into paranormal phenomena than I was actually aware of.
Yeah.
Because these are the things that aren't publicly made aware.
Mm-hmm.
The research, so like things like the research that the SPR are doing or have conducted over the years isn't in the public mainstream. Because what we are, and you know, this is not, I'm not criticising the TV programs because, you know, they're
entertainment. They're for entertainment.
That's exactly it. And you know, we know that, you know, this field. Okay, so that, you know, these TV programs cannot solely survive on, you know, paranormal enthusiasts. So they have to rely on the general public in order to get their viewing, in order to kind of continue kind of being able to make these episodes and sell the program. So, you know, do the general public really want to see someone giving a lecture for an hour or so about various different aspects of, related to like some scientific research that they've done? I don't think the general public do, because they just want to witness the theatrical side of it, the spookiness, the excitement of that element of it, you know. So this is why, you know, from a ghost hunting point of view, when I first started out, I was not aware of all the real good research that had been conducted already until I got into the field. And actually realized, you know, because in my head I was like, well, science will never come up with an explanation for paranormal phenomena, you know, and that was my belief. But now I'm like, actually, there's so much stuff we don't know, and there's so much stuff actually we still don't know. We know a lot about our physical reality, but there's still like lots of elements that we still don't know. And this, you know, and this is the thing about it, and this is why, you know, I've come away with more questions than I have answers. I feel like, you know, now, you know, I went into the field thinking I was a know-it-all and I knew everything to do with, you know, the paranormal field. And actually, you know, you come away thinking, actually, I don't really know anything at all. But I'm willing to find out.
It's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. It's just led me to more and more questions, and the thirst for explaining those is stronger than going out in the field and just investigating now. For me, I haven't been out at all for, well, getting on for pretty much about a year now, I think, because I've been too busy just trying to learn more about my area in all of this, you know. One thing we have... Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in the chat room. I do appreciate this is quite a deep topic and theory, but thank you so much. Kaz has actually asked, but how could it explain this theory? How could it explain some experiences of phenomena and some don't? So how does it explain some people get it and some people don't? So is that a vibrational frequency thing? So the gravitational bubbles are causing a reaction within a person which makes them more susceptible to picking up that information, do you think?
I'm aware of someone else's kind of research into it, though I'm not really familiar with it. But someone did. There was something to do with some people have a certain brain tissue or something or other. I don't know the full ins and outs. I'll have to kind of delve into it. That basically makes it a bit more susceptible to the kind of to detect these kind of anomalies or something along the line. I could be wrong in what I'm saying, but from what I kind of brief kind of discussion I had with it or overheard, you know, for that example. But
so there would be something within the human body. Yes.
Make
it more, like you say, some people would end up being more susceptible to picking up this phenomena than others, which is where we could
Absolutely.
then look at why mediums pick up things or why sensitives pick up
Yeah,
certain
I mean,
things.
this is the thing. For me personally, like I said, I'm not 100% sure exactly to what variance in measurement I'm looking for. So, for example, because what in Thomas's theory, he breaks down paranormal phenomena into different categories. One of his categories is that kind of sort of psychic phenomena comes under a category called transmentation. Is something how he's kind of a subcategory of what he calls it. So under transmentation, basically, this is stuff that obviously, people obviously, for example, like, kind of your psychic kind of mediumship stuff, for me, from how I perceive from the work, would be detecting a far, far smaller anomaly in the gravitational field. Maybe one that isn't so easily detectable with the devices that we have. Because they're so minute, because it's a different type of different type of set of information that's coming through. Yeah, because basically the psychic medium will detect. So, for example, detect the information. So when they're when they're saying, there's a lady in black that's coming forward, and this happened to them. Yeah. It's basically what happened is this information about a past event, is being abstracted from the non-physical, and kind of materializing into the physical mind, into the physical brain. So that for me would be a smaller kind of immersion of the gravitational field, whereas something like an apparition, or a light anomaly would present as a bigger gravitational field anomaly because there's more mass,
Right.
So more likely to be detectable. But like I said, for example, this is why the sensor arrangement and how many sensors there are is so important, because it may be just pot luck that paranormal phenomena needs to materialize in or around that sensor in order for it to be able to detect it. This is what I'm saying. This is why it's more difficult research than kind of just going in for a night and kind of walking around with a device, because this research can't be done in that way. It has to be done in a kind of, how I'll kind of phrase it is, I've designed a kind of field laboratory, because I've created a stationary experiment that is designed to have controls, that so basically I'll be able to know what things affect my experiment, what don't. I should be able to know who's in and around near the experiment, and should be able to know exactly the data that should be coming through with no anomalies detected, and also then it should be able to then give me an idea of when I detect an anomaly. But the thing is, I don't know necessarily, this is what I'm saying, I don't necessarily know what I'm 100% detecting at the moment. I have been advised to speak to a physicist who specialises in relativity, in order to kind of maybe do a mathematical equation for it to kind of But I'm still in the process of kind of formulating, how I'm going to, with my approach in them, because I'm not always the best at articulating, what my point is, across to people, and especially people in that kind of academic area. You've got to be quite precise with what you want to say to them.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm kind of working on at the moment, is looking at, kind of how I'm going to kind of, approach them for that. But I have got a friend who has got a few friends at the Open University, because a lady that I work with actually is doing a PhD at the Open University at the moment. So she knows a few people, and they are able to do the mathematics, but they don't specialise in them areas. So I was kind of umming on whether or not to say, could they do it, because
help.
It's not necessarily their speciality. And when I spoke to Thomas last, that was his kind of recommendation, that it was someone who specialises more in relativity, because that's their area of specialty.
Okay.
Yeah, and they should be able to kind of. But I mean, with the emergence of these gravitational field bubbles, these are things that he has kind of discussed, with physicists, within these special areas, and and said, what effects would I experience, if this was to occur? And all the effects that I explained earlier that come from it are all the things that we measure with our ghost hunting gadgets.
Yeah,
it's just that we've never had a framework, a perceived solid framework to work with in order to put these things together and make, to understand them, why they occur, how they occur.
Because we're looking for the wrong thing, though. We're looking for spirits and things like that, rather than looking for an anomaly, and trying to understand the source and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, because everyone always focuses more on the electromagnetic spectrum rather than anything else, don't they? And then that's what we refer to, and that's kind of the focus point. Whereas, actually, the electromagnetic field is an effect of this process occurring. So that's why that's why there's under Foster's model is that there's always been that kind of link missing, because that's always been the focus point, because we always the most kind of detectable anomaly when paranormal phenomena occurs is everyone has their electromagnetic field detectors like K2 meters, tri-field meters, or whatever we use in the field. I've lost touch with all the gadgets because I haven't bothered purchasing any for a couple of years now. But that's what we've always focused on, and I know that's what I focused on when I used to run a society, and we had someone who built us a customized data logger. Electromagnetic field was the main sensor that we wanted to kind of put in place with this data logger, which now obviously from this research is obviously just one of the effects of this emerging gravitational field bubble.
Wow, guys. That is quite a theory and quite a piece of tech that you're developing, Graham, and all I can say is good luck and well done.
Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing more updates as you go through this area of work that you're doing, because, like you say, you're really sort of at the start of this process. This is not a 5-minute project. This is a project that's going to take you years, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and also as well, with regards to the work, I'm still having to learn everything as I'm going along, and that means I'm having to research a lot of different type of science, due to just down to like particle physics, down to astrophysics, and all different types of fields. It just boggles my mind, because obviously things with me seem to take a little bit longer to kind of process than some people. So
I'm the same as you, Graham. Don't worry.
I have to go over and over again with things, and it's like, why can't I just get my head around this? You know. But generally when when I've had a conversation with Thomas, I may ask him a question, and he can kind of help explain it to me, so I kind of get it a bit more. So that's good. And anyone else who's kind of specialises in these kind of areas, their kind of advice and the guidance would be very much appreciated too.
Very much so. So please get in touch with either Graham directly, or you can contact us at Parasearch Radio through Facebook, Twitter, website, parasearchradio.org, I believe it is now. Anywhere, basically, or any of the presenters, if you know anybody that could be helpful in this particular research project, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Graham, and discussing this with us, because I know it's very complex. It's very difficult to break it down to my understanding. Thank you so much, Ashley, as well, for joining us tonight.
Pleasure, as always.
Don't forget, guys, over on the Parasearch Radio group page on Facebook, we have a competition running at the moment. It's for a book, a hard copy book, called The Wicked Shall Decay by Mr. Mercer, Andy Mercer, who has written it. I'm actually reading this book at the moment, and it is fantastic. It's a thoroughly interesting read about charms, spells and witchcraft of Old Britain. Absolutely fascinating book it is. Trust me, you want to put your name on the comments section of the competition if you'd like to be in for a chance of winning that. That will get drawn next Sunday on a Facebook Live. Don't forget, tomorrow I will be going live on the Facebook group page to give you a rundown of all the shows and gossip that's been going on in the Parasearch Radio world. And on that note, again, I want to say thank you so much to everybody tuning in. If you've missed any of our shows, pop over to our YouTube channel, Parasearch Radio. Click like, share and subscribe. And on that note, we bid you all a good evening. Say good night, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.